Well, I know I was one of those parents that, well, because I worked with, at any given time, I was responsible for 47 to 50 some families.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right,
And
right.
if I had one on the phone, I always wanted to dedicate to that. And I did not take from family time unless it was an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And so my children and I got a little thing going. And when they wanted my attention, they would let me know, and I would put my finger up. And I would keep my finger up until I was finished the phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And that let them know that I did not forget
Mm-hmm.
and that I would get to
Mm-hmm.
them.
Yeah.
And so, but that was more about training me
Right, right.
and giving them security,
Yeah.
because if I'm just sitting like this, that's okay. It's not going to distract me from being in conversation with you and being there with you and
Mm-hmm.
what your needs are.
Yeah.
This is a no big deal.
Right.
But after a little while, it kind of can get to be a big deal. But the child knew that
Mm-hmm.
I still had them in my mind. I just needed to focus over here first.
Yeah.
And then we got to,
Good.
some other points like it's not cool to say I love you to your child in front of other people. So
From their perspective.
from their perspective,
Yeah.
it was horrible.
Yeah.
And don't kiss me.
Right.
And so it was a poke in the arm.
Mm-hmm.
I could do that, and
Yeah.
I was safe. My sons were like, so that's what I would do. Having those signs,
Right.
kind of help unload some stress levels.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Communication is super important. Um, and the apology thing, um, it had to do with a lot of control, self-control for me, because I did get a lot of outside pressure. I was living in a neighborhood that did not homeschool, so we were the weird people. Um, we didn't have family support. They were like, "Are you kidding?
Mm-hmm.
You and Eric are educated people. What are you doing? That's weird people."
Right.
And so there was a lot of people didn't know how to take us or to understand, and so it was very lonely
Mm-hmm.
at times.
Yeah.
But then I purposefully went out and I sought other homeschoolers, and then to find homeschoolers that had the same value system,
Mm-hmm.
and learning from others outside of my value system. And it's been a fun journey. And now that I'm grandma, turning around, looking back, I am so glad that I could spend the time with my children in that way.
Yes.
I grew up a lot.
Yes. Right.
um, you can get humbled very quickly. um, and it's just been a true blessing. And um, now that we are having more people, homeschooling is an okay thing to do, by the way.
Right.
And in my opinion, always has been, just not always a choice.
Right.
But now that it's open, it's okay. A lot of people are homeschooling, and some are home educating just after school. They have their children in public or private schools or charter schools, and then they have their children. And I don't think they realize that when you're doing homework, you're home educating your child.
Right.
You're home educating when you have that timer on for brushing the teeth. All these things are home educating.
Yeah.
It's just, are you doing it full time or not? But now we're having parents who need to have an income, and I think it's getting more and more because the economy, things are costing a lot more money. And in the past, you really could do one parent and it'd be okay. Now, I'm starting to see some shifts and changes where two parents need to be bringing in income. And
Right.
what do you think about coming from a place of rest when you have both parents? I pull in grandparents at that point.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the beauty of the of having friendship, community, neighbors, and that's more possible now because you're not the weirdo. You don't have to be the weirdo anymore. I mean, I remember when we started the, I won't say who, but there was one family member between our two families that every year, would ask, "Are you guys still homeschooling?" And it was like the way they said the word "still" it was like, you shouldn't be. What are you still doing that thing that you know, is that fad thing that you were doing over yet? And it used to just grate, like my wife's soul was, just being shredded right there by it. But that's not the case anymore, right? Like homeschooling is kind of normalized, and it's, you don't have to, you can let your kids go outside during the school day now and
That's
not worry
right.
about truancy officers.
Yep.
And so there is that wonderful aspect to it that the the spouses can divide the workload, like mom's good at math and dad's good at writing, or vice versa, or whatever. And so there's more of expectation that there's kind of some sharing going on there, or mom's good with the little kids, dad's good with the older kids, whatever. But then you also have grandparents, and you have neighbors, and co-ops, the communities and stuff that are out there that you have access to people that can help you, and allow for that kind of extra work, or the job that's necessary, because obviously the economy is not our friend at this point, right? With inflation and everything, you know, everything's everything's becoming so much more difficult from a financial perspective. But there's this community that's kind of built up now that's can help us with all of that. I mean, there's that famous line. Was it Hillary Clinton, I think, that said something about it takes a village to raise a child, and I mean, I remember conservatives and Christians being terrified by hating the fact that she said it, and no, it doesn't. It takes the mom and the dad or the parents or whatever. The problem is that she really is right.
Yeah.
She just doesn't know what the village is.
Right. Right.
Her conception of the village is, I understand it, would be very, very different than my conception of the village, put it that way. But I'm glad that that my wife had other families in our church and our community that were there to support and help, and that I could join in. I think when my kids got to like 11th and 12th grade, I got more involved with them on a daily basis, but a little bit probably in 9th grade, but 11th and 12th grade specifically, especially, much more involved. And that that we had that kind of village of support.
I know I have quite a few friends that are homeschool families, and they have like 7 children. And I shouldn't say too much. I had 5, but they have 7 children, and
I'm just sitting over here in my little 3.
and watching the older children educate the younger children.
Yes. Right.
And I saw that, and I was like, wow, that is so cool, because I know when I'm trying to learn something, I'll take the information in, but I learn more when I'm teaching it. And so seeing some of those dynamics in the family, and then watching the student be the teacher and just blossom in knowledge. And if you allow it to happen, and letting the older student instruct the younger student and make mistakes, and not interject and jump in. I've watched that, and it's like, kudos to the mom who could sit there and because I'm a corrector. And perfection is in there too sometimes, but just kind of watching that develop. And that is so healthy for the family.
Yes.
Because it's all working together. And I noticed that comparison was removed when you have the older child teaching the younger child, and if they made mistakes, that younger child's not trying to be perfect like the older child.
Hmm. Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good. You know, I'm glad you brought that up because the well, there's this for me it's a famous quotation from Andrew Pruitt, who also you
Oh, I've
interviewed with
interviewed
him,
him,
yeah,
yeah,
and he's amazing, of
he
course.
is.
And but there's a famous line that I heard from him years and years ago about, um, I guess he was, kind of, I think in defense of homeschooling, he was kind of teasing that, schools put all the kids of the same age together in one room, and how it's just a bizarre concept because children aren't born in litters.
Right.
You don't have 7 kids all at the same time, the same
Right.
age, right? Like puppies are born. And that the more natural approach would obviously be in a mixed room. And what's fascinating is that, at CiRCE we do a lot of work with homeschooling parents, moms and dads all over the country. But we also do a lot of work with schools, and we have consultants that'll go out and do teacher training for schools, and share with them what we've discovered and our understanding of it. And one of the things that I'm starting to hear more, like very, very, very recent, it's not widespread yet, but one of the things that I'm starting to hear from schools is, how do we do a mixed classroom? And they're asking us, like, how can we mix our classrooms and have it go from 7 to 17 or whatever, And I'm like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Go on, tell me more about what you're seeing. And one of the things is that the comparison is beautiful, because I hadn't heard that or noticed it or thought of it yet, or I hadn't heard anybody else think of it yet. But the idea that you put a bunch of 12-year-old boys and girls in the same room, and it brings out certain personality traits, qualities,
Yep.
and tactics, right? Like how they're going to get attention and how they're going to do this and how they're going to do that. You put a couple of those 12-year-old boys and girls in a room with a couple of 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds and down to 7-year-olds, and now all of a sudden this 12-year-old boy doesn't want to act as ridiculous because he doesn't want the 16-year-old boy to think he's an idiot, or he wants him to think he's cool. So he wants to act a little bit more mature, like this guy. But he also knows, this 12-year-old boy also can see it's still in that framework, right? That this 7-year-old boy is actually looking up to him in the same way and imitating him, and he doesn't want to act a certain way that's going to lead this boy to act a certain way. Because if that guy sees that, then that and this whole chain of like it somehow kind of balances out their behavior in a way that it matures all of them.
Yep.
And the 17-year-old doesn't want to act super immature because he doesn't want the 12, because he's annoyed by the 12-year-old acting that way, but now he's aware that he's annoyed by it, and all of their behavior kind of gets
Think
tempered
about
by all
in
of that.
Titus, we have the mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have mentors, and I mentor people.
Yeah.
And
right.
it's the same thing. I am learning, and I look up
Yes.
to my mentor.
Right.
And then I hope the ones that I'm mentoring that I'm helpful to. So far, I've been told, wow, I have some, real epiphanies for them occasionally.
Yeah.
And yes, and then walking alongside people. I mean, it's not just for adults. It's not just for the workplace. It's not just, they do it in colleges. When you come, they connect you with another student to hang out with the day. Why wouldn't we do that with, the younger kids?
Right.
And our children had mentors, and I did kind of scope them out ahead of time, because there's some people who want to be mentors that maybe don't follow your value system.
Right.
And so the mentors that we were able to have in our children's lives were, just phenomenal people. And we there were some differences, but not that it would impact our family value system.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I can see it took the schools a little while to come up with that.
Yeah, a little while.
It's always been there. It's right there in scripture.
Well, and it started out that way, right? The one room schoolhouse was that way, and then
Yes.
we, factory streamlined and made everything more efficient,
Mm-hmm.
and created this kind of factory model. But the homeschool just kept on plugging away, right? Because you don't give birth to children in litters, so you've got a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old together, or whatever.
Yep.
And so it's right. It's all of those things, right? Like they stop comparing themselves in the wrong ways.
Mm-hmm.
They stop behaving like lunatics, and they get the opportunity to teach each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is both directions, right? I mean, you can imagine a 17-year-old teaching the 12-year-old how to do, whatever, some long division problem or something, right? And then the 17-year-old understanding it better as a result. But also, as we were saying earlier about our own children, it's happened at least once, maybe hopefully only once, but at least once in my life where, my wife and I get upset with each other, and then I raise my voice and I'm talking to her, and then one of my kids comes along and says, "Daddy, but we're not supposed to talk to mommy like that." And I'm learning from my child, right, that I shouldn't talk to their mother in the way that I am, with the volume or whatever. And I learned in that moment from my 6-year-old or whatever, or 4-year-old, whatever it was. But the same thing happens in these one-room schoolhouses, right? The 17-year-old does slip up and act immaturely, and then the 7-year-old says or does something that's the reminder. So, and the simplicity of the questions, right? Because the older you get, the more inclined you become in a classroom setting, in a public setting, right? I have to ask a smart question.
Yes.
Or I have to have a smart observation. And the 7-year-old is the one that's saying, "What? He had brown hair." And then the 17 was like, "Well, why would you say that? I would never say that." Or they would think that if another 17-year-old said it, but because the 7-year-old says it, it gets said, and now the 17-year-old can make the connection. Oh, and because he has brown hair, that means this.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can make those connections that they would never have made because somebody wasn't willing to just throw out such a simple fact,
I mean, it really does. I just did a preach week at school, and one of the things I was noticing is in our adult Bibles, there are stories that are missing. For example, the little boy who had the five fish and loaves. That's not in my adult Bibles, and I checked 7 of them.
What?
The story of the child
Yeah.
offering up what he had.
Yeah.
And the children's Bibles, it's there, but it's not in the adult Bibles. And in my opinion, then what happens is I'm setting myself up I'm supposed to speak, I'm supposed to ask, I'm supposed to have clarification in this adult manner.
Yeah.
Because I have that big people book.
Yeah.
And then in the children's book, it goes through the story where Jesus sends, the 12 to go find, what do we have? What do you have? And then they have it goes into the story of this little boy has his lunch, his mother made, and he offers it up to them.
Yeah.
And says, "This is what I have." And they take what he has back to Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's like, where's that childlikeness in us?
Mm-hmm.
In our readings, is it being removed?
Mm-hmm.
It goes to your point of the questions, the type of questions we asked. Will we feel shame because we asked that question? And I tell people, you put your pants on the same way I do. There's never going to be a dumb question.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If you're talking with me, I always jump to, wow, I didn't communicate well. Because that's me.
Yeah.
Because I always am going to lift the person in front of me higher. It was my miscommunication. I didn't do something, which is not always the greatest place to be, by the way.
Yeah.
I overthink. But there's no dumb question. And when you have the multi-level children, and that's why when you're at home and you can homeschool, like in our home, we had an open floor plan. You could have somebody on the couch, somebody on the floor, somebody at the kitchen table, somebody at the bar top. And they're listening and they're hearing the questions the others are asking,
Right.
versus the child who goes to their room
Mm-hmm.
and when they're off and they have that computer, there's other issues that could be there.
Right.
And it's not because your child is bad, it's society bringing into the home.
Absolutely, right.
And so having people around is very good, and they can help each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that, Andrew's talking about his children as adults and how they work together and they care for one another.
Yeah.
And I think that they just really modeled that well in their home, homeschooling their children, and then as adults, they're doing the same thing. And so having multiple ages of children working together in the same environment, and I believe Classical Conversations has a math map that's coming out that I think is going to be really cool.
Very excited.
Because when in the brain integration business, there are some students who are higher level in certain aspects of math, like they can get the story problems, and there's others, they're not getting the story problem at all.
Right.
And so if you have that older child who's teaching the story problem to the younger child, it's going to reinforce what they already know.
Right, right.
And so anyway, it's just, I think that's one of the cool things about that multi-age education.
Yeah, and those younger children, they're like 11 for our wonder. Because there's, I mean, even as we said a moment ago, like just certain kinds of things that the older student can't ask or can't say because they sound immature, but the little kid can say, and it creates this sense of wonder, or kind of grows this sense of wonder for us. But it also like gives me permission to do it. This is kind of a dumb example, but a couple months ago I was watching some YouTube videos and I came across this like dance instruction video, and I thought, I want to learn how to dance. Like, I don't know how to dance, I want to learn how to dance. And there was a certain style of dance that they were teaching, some Spanish thing. I can't remember what it's called, bachata or no, I can't remember. Anyways, so I was watching this video, and they have me get up, and so I'm like standing up in my living room, and I did it for like 30 seconds, and then I sat down and like switched to a different video. And I remember thinking, like, I don't want to be standing in my living room. And it was 11 o'clock at night, right? And I'm standing in my living room following these dances. But I was so embarrassed that one of my family members would come out and catch me dancing that I turned it off after 30 seconds. And then I sat down and I thought, but if one of the granddaughters was here, then I could do it. And it's so weird, right? Like, like I'm embarrassed to get up and dance. I'm embarrassed to learn how to dance. But if I had a 4-year-old with me, now all of a sudden I'm willing to, oh, let's do this, honey, and I probably would have done it for hours and hours, or whatever, and not ever been thought one thing about if my wife walked in, or if one of my sons walked in, or if my father-in-law walked in. None of that would have mattered to me because I'm a 4-year-old here, and like she's her very presence and her big blue eyes and her smile and her the way she cocks her head at me when she thinks I'm funny or something, all of that is like permission to be childlike again for me. She's giving me permission to be childlike, and that that can happen in front of the dance video in the living room. And it happens in the classroom, or better, it happens. I mean, it can happen in the classroom. Schools would start doing this, but it happens right there at the dining table, the living room, and the bar top, and right there, all that. Right?
And I think the thing that just downloaded for me was remember the feelings you had when you could have possibly been called out by someone for being silly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so when you're working with your children and you're talking with them, try to step back and get in their shoes. How are they going to feel? And I'm talking, Johnny is going to feel very different from Susie, and they are both your children, but they're going to feel different on how you ask that question or you point out an opportunity for change.
Mm-hmm.
And remember that feeling of whatever it could possibly be, because then you're taking care of their heart. And that's one of the things when I was working in the brain integration program, whenever you're working with children, remember their heart. If they are 12, but functionally in reading, they're 6, remember their heart.
Yeah.
No condemnation, no would've, should've, could've, and I don't have other words for that. But remember the language you're using with them, and always take care of their heart. That's very important, because what children hear about themselves or assume about themselves, they'll carry that with them.
Right.
And it shows up in their other actions and relationships.
But if you connect that back to kind of what we started with, the teaching from rest and the perspective about the world's goals and the Lord's goals for us, I mean, really, how many moms would not agree that it's more important that my child learn to be loving and kind toward his siblings or towards younger neighbor kids or whatever in a given moment than it is that he finished some particular worksheet in a timeline, you know? And the thing is, I think we get distracted by the world's goals or the world's demands on us, that we think finishing the worksheet is the most important thing. You've got to finish 45 worksheets this semester or whatever, you know? And the reality is, the thing that he needs to know is to embrace childlike wonder, to embrace being kind to a 7-year-old, embrace being patient with a 12-year-old when you're trying to help him with his long division, whatever, or reading or whatever, you know. All of the lessons that he will learn, that he, I guess, in your 16 or 17-year-old son, or whatever it is, you know, the older child can learn through those activities with the younger children. Those lessons are way more valuable than the 45 worksheets that he would have crushed out in 4 months or something, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think we've covered a lot on rest.
I hope so, yeah.
I definitely think I'll be coming back here to CiRCE Institute for more information as the show grows and as people start submitting, hey, I'm really interested in learning more about this or that. I hope that the door is still open as it is now and can come in and get some more information. And once again, I appreciate you guys taking your time to sit down and visit with me and just, be in conversation. And you shared some wealth of information that I think it's going to really help towards my goal of empowering parents and to know that it's okay to fail and start over again and learn a little bit what rest can mean in their home.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome, and thank you. And I will join you in praying for those mothers to experience all of that and to receive all that themselves. So thank God.
Thank you.